everybody, this is Ann. Jim and I looked around the house for items that we could use to add textures to the clay. Between the things we found and some suggestions from the Facebook Pottery Studio group, I'll show you 10 ideas we came up with. First, let's add some textures to freshly thrown pots. This idea was inspired by the video we did on 10 great ideas for rims. I took a wire brush drill attachment and stuck the spindle into the hole of a wooden ball so the brush would spin. I then pressed the wire brush up against the clay as it was spinning. The brush shredded the clay so that the cylinder took on kind of a furry corset. Next, I used the ridges on the back of a seashell to give the bottom third of the cylinder grooves. For added interest, I had these little tiny shells I got at the craft store that had cool spirals on the bottom. So that I could get better leverage, I made a handle out of a coil of clay and attached it to the top of the shell. I then pressed the shell around the top of the cylinder. This gives the cylinder a real beachy theme. I thought it would be fun to experiment with sodium silicate. I first coated a freshly thrown pot with black underglaze. Once that was dry, I applied a layer of sodium silicate. I then hit it with a heat gun for a few minutes until the sodium silicate was dry. Using a red rib, I pushed the clay out so that the dried out layer began to crack. The more I pushed out, the more cracks I got so that the white clay underneath was revealed. This is really the first time I've tried this. I love that result. This next one I'm calling the sodium silicate crackle. Well, maybe not that much crackle. For this one, I thought I would pre-texture the clay with this spreader trowel that I found at the hardware store. I then added the sodium silicate and let it dry. Like the last one, I pushed the clay out to see what would happen. This resulted in floating broken rows of squares on the outside Surprisingly, there was another layer of tinier broken clay slivers in between the rows. That was really cool. Next, we're going to combine textures to create this quilted pot. After throwing the pot, I needed to divide the surface into 5 sections. I used this trimming spinner to make marks along the top of the space and the bottom. I then used a needle to make light lines on the pot surface like so. Then I used a seamstress tracing wheel along those light lines. To give the piece a quilted appearance, I pushed in the clay where the lines crossed. Using the same shell spiral that we used in the first project, I created 5 little buttons like this. Then I scored and slipped them into each indentation along the center. To add more volume, I wet my finger, placed it behind each of the triangles, and gently pushed the clay out. Finally, I used the fancy end of a spoon, pushed into a thin slab of clay to create appliques. I scored and slipped them along the top space. Very fancy. Now let's put some textures on slabs. For this one, I used a rectangular piece of scrap aluminum that had a slight crease in it. I wrapped it in painter's tape so it wouldn't stick to the clay, cut the top into a perfect triangle, and began pushing it into the clay side by side. For each subsequent row, I lined up the corners along the triangle so that it created kind of a dragon's tooth design. Boy, that'd be a great hand-built tumbler. Judy Berman from the Pottery Studio group on Facebook suggested using corn on the cob. That'd be perfect for a tray to serve corn on the cob with. I also thought it looked like maybe honeycomb? For number 8, I found this scrap of shelf liner to experiment with. It made a great net appearance. I also found that if you fold it and line up the squares just right, you can get a whole other texture. Susan Shellman, Christine Riley, and Karen Schwank gave me the suggestion to use a lemon zester. I smeared a little Vaseline on the grater so it wouldn't stick, and then I pressed it into the clay like so. It created a neat texture that from far away took on more of a diamond-shaped appearance, but close up, You actually see shadowed polka dots. Finally, I used a bottle cleaner brush to roll texture onto the slab. I thought if you use it at different heights, it might look like a line of pine trees. When I rolled it in successive rows, it had the appearance of terry cloth or even a cylinder from a music box. I hope these ideas inspire you to look around and experiment with the things you find around your home. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time in the studio.